have no fear of cooking. Suppose you make a flop. If you don't apologize, nobody knows what you're trying to do. You know
Punky Doodles is back. Back! For anyone who gave a poop about that. If you are unfamiliar with me, I made a few very low-viewed videos on book reviews. I was focusing on modernist books because that was where my interest was at the time, and just some life stuff. Honestly, we can get right into it. This is going to be a book review, and it actually goes into context with this. I stopped making YouTube video book reviews. Not because the videos were bugging me. It was because I couldn't get myself to read. I went through a dry spell. I went through a crazy dry spell. Now, other than for school, it's been really hard to motivate myself to read. When I was a kid, I was one of those scholastic book order kids. Those friggin' book fair festival things that they bring at the school. That was a thing. My parents, they were like, yeah, you can read. We'll get you books. We'll get you books, dude. And so I'd get a ton of books and I'd read them all. I was a really quick reader. In fact, probably my all-time greatest reading feat, is, I think I was 10, and I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire in 24 hours, dude. 24 hours. That's the greatest. But yeah, back then I was read. And then my leisure reading kind of went out the door as I grew up, and going to university and stuff, you have to read a lot anyway, so that's kind of what I did. And I think that's why I was doing modernist books for 5 videos, was because I that's when I took English classes, that was what I was interested in, in the frame of academic, I don't know, literature reviews. That was my favorite part always, was the modernist era. And I think I burnt myself out a little bit on it, just because there's not a super lot of relatability. I mean, there's the human experience relatability, but I think I needed a modern take. So I said 10 minutes ago that this is all going to relate to the book, I think. So that brings us to today's book. It's called The Wager. I have a written thing, so I'm going to be reading off of my paper, my cue card a little. So if I'm not looking you in the eye, I'm reading this. Maybe I could hold it up. That looks like good eye contact, right? Okay, so I was really moved by this book that the review was on. I was on a huge dry spell. You can make an assumption that things have changed now. So the book was really good. The book was really good. Okay, I'll just start reading. So I've been in a reading slump the past few years. I don't know what held me back. I just couldn't make myself read or make myself interested in reading. I knew I was going to go on to a vacation this summer, and I thought I'd try and reinvigorate myself. In the spring, my town had a little book festival thing where all the bookstores, I don't know, had a scavenger hunt thing. So I went with some friends. We went crack of dawn, hitting the streets downtown, and just looked at books. And I got a actually pretty nice bookmark out of it. Anyway, when we were there, they're driving traffic into the store. That's the whole point of this. And it was perfectly fine. I felt obligated to buy a book. I wasn't reading anything at the time. I felt obligated to buy a book. And I was just kind of looking around this bookstore, and I found, bing bong, The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder. Now, I know a little bit about this book. I know it's really popular right now. I know that because fucking doorbell rings. Fuck off. Seriously? Mormon missionaries, bro. Where was I? Okay, I knew a little bit about the book. I knew it was popular. I actually bought it for my dad for Christmas because I knew it was popular. You know, it's like on those chapters, like, you have to read it stands. And my dad likes stuff like that sometimes, I guess. So I bought it for him. I knew they were making a movie about it. I know Martin Scorsese's making the movie about it. And I know it's the same writer as, or same author as the book and then movie Killers of the Flower Moon. So I knew a little bit about it. And so, and honestly, this cover is just absolutely banging. I don't think the colors are coming off as good in this video recording. The blues, the greens, the white, the chip, absolutely top notch. Now, another thing about me is I'm a little bit of a sucker for nautical stories, books. One of my all-time favorite books is Sailing Alone Around the World by Joshua Slocum. Love that book. It's like, I guess, the closest thing to my, I don't know. Like, I really like the guy. It's a very motivating book. Anyway, where was I? Covers aesthetically. Anyway, so I bought that in the spring, and then I like leave it, and I wait, and I hold on to it till my vacation in the summer. And I just, on my downtime, when I'm not going out and doing things on my vacation, I was like, I'm going to just read. I'm not going to bring my laptop. I'm going to be really conservative with my technology time because I want myself to read. And I felt like I was being a little too optimistic in this. So I started forcing myself to read The Wager. And holy shit, that encapsulated me fucking instantly. I am not shitting you. I went from a guy, I literally, 328 pages in 6 days. I would read, there was two days that I read 100 pages in a day. Like, not like all day reading. I just like have 2 hours sitting in the living room waiting for supper and fuck, like, it's gone, bro. Like, this book did not stand a goddamn chance. So I'm gassing this up a little bit. So going back to that Harry Potter day, I thought that little boy was dead and gone. I was wrong. That kid was always there. He came soaring back, man. So it got me pretty amped. Every day I was like, oh, I need to read this book. You know, I'm not like fucking actually foaming at the mouth, but I was like super interested in it. So I have a note here. So maybe at this point, you can tell that I will be leaving a glowing review of this book. I doubt the author will see this, and the author's name is David Grann. But if he does see it, I really hope you're proud. No library is safe from the bibliophile you created in me. That's good for me for making that joke. Okay, the author, David Grann, he's a former writer for The New Yorker, which I actually read for a long time. It was like, I when I was a kid, I wanted to like be cooler than I actually was, and I knew The New Yorker was kind of prestigious, so I asked for a subscription, and we get it, and you know, pretty over my head. Even these days, it's got a very New York post-grad sensibility to it, but that's where he was. He's quite an intelligent author, and he eventually went on to write several acclaimed books. You might know them, and these have been made movies, but The Lost City of Z and Killers of the Flower Moon, which I mentioned earlier. What he uses for these books is research to locate mysterious occurrences in history, and then exploits that history to create a riveting thriller. Rooted in the details of the people involved, he takes their words as truth, compares them to contrary accounts from their contemporaries, and strings together the plot, the mischief, and the murder. So, this guy's great. This book, The Wager, it's a story of ambition, survival, the limits of human endurance, and hierarchy. In a way, it encapsulates politics of the time, the politics and the honor of the time, and shows how powerfully it can misguide people while others feel a deep need to rebel. Now, we will be talking about this later, but actually a lot of what this book is about is using media and using the medium to control truth. Gets a little heady, and if you read it and you just want a cool story, you get that from this book. And actually, I read it and I was like, fuck, that was awesome. I can't wait to, now that I can read, I can't wait to read a book for the Punky Doodles channel that's more smart, right? That was like kind of like my first reaction. But as I sat and thought about it, as I sat and thought about it, I realized how freaking fascinating this book is in a modern sense. We can take it as like an allegory about media and how the portrayal of oneself and countering other portrayals of yourself really matter a lot more than truth. So, okay, I'm going to go into a brief overview of the book. So, we will be going into territory. So if you don't like spoilers, fuck off. Like, you're done. All we're going to talk about is spoilers. So go read the book. Come back. Like, seriously. You're an embarrassment. Go away. We don't want your kind around here. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler alert. It's a spoiler, spoiler alert. I think that's how that goes. I think I remember that. Okay, first thing we're going to go through is the summary. So I'm just going to do point by point, in case you read it a while ago and we need to recollect some things. Okay, so we're in the 17-somethings for the wager. We're in the wager. We're in the 17-somethings right now. And at this point in colonial times, Spain is kind of the big dog, right? You know, from a Western perspective now, we kind of always saw Britain as the big dog, but it really was, they were kind of the dogs, right? They were the power to fucking fuck with, and Britain was not it, man. They were not it, and they needed to punch up, and so they wanted to start a war. They needed to start a war, and they had some baloney nonsense. Started this war, and they're like, okay, we gotta do all this funky shit to really mess with Spain because they are like really rich. So they have an idea for a plan. They got a really good plan. They're like, all right, so we're gonna get an armada of little tiny warships, tiny compared to like the big fuckers, right? We're gonna get an armada of 5 ships and secretly send them south, all the way around South America, back around north to Peru, because that's where they make all the gold, right? We're going to get them at their soft little underbelly where they make the gold, which is a brilliant idea. That strategy makes a whole lot of sense, except going around that way goes through perhaps the most treacherous stretch of ocean on planet Earth. I think in the book they actually explain it. I went and did some more research, so I might be a little fucked up about this. The sea around the Antarctic is like the area of the most unimpeded water going from ocean to ocean. Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. So when pressure builds up, it can send winds, and it doesn't get broken up by land. So these winds can go around and 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 get fucking crazy. And so, yeah, the British plan is to go south. Problem is, the Spanish don't even do that, okay? They think it's easier to get the gold from Peru, from their slaves, and then take it to Panama, where they make their slaves carry the gold, which is heavy, across land to get in other ships and then sail off. So not even Spain goes this way to get their gold, okay? To get gold, to get the most gold the world's ever seen, they don't go that way. But the British Admiralty is like, my boys, you can easily make this trip. So they try to get a big group of people. This book taught me a lot, actually. I didn't know about this. I've heard the term. I never thought about it. This book tells you about a thing called press gangs. Did you know that there was no like mandatory conscription for the army back in the day? And when a war started, like literally the armed forces would kidnap people, just kidnap them and force them into the army. Like you could literally be like, walking on to your job. You could be a fucking lawyer, right? You could be walking to your job and some press gang's like, hey man, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm defending someone, it's actually I'm a human rights lawyer. And they're like, how about you fucking haul rope all day for 10 years, huh? And then they take you and throw you away, and then you don't really have a choice. So I'm saying this because the book gives you this context of Britain really is desperate to make a splash. Sea joke. Send 5 ships to go on this really horrible idea of a mission. And it's filled with people who kind of don't really want to be there at all. Big characters to look out for, if you remember, or if you're going to read and want this as like a strategic thing. David Cheap. He's a high-level officer in the Navy. And he is actually on the way down. This Armada's already said he's just like a lieutenant or whatever. Some shit goes wrong with the captain of one of the ships, and so they promote him, and this is his opportunity to be the captain for the first time. His whole career has been leading up to this. So David Cheap is just like, yes, now's my chance. This is my time to make history. And that ship that he was put on is called the Wager, interestingly enough. That's kind of relevant. Other character, probably like the most consistent frame of view is John Byron, who is like the grandfather of some other dude named Byron, who's more famous for some reason. He's like the second or third son of this noble dude, so he's kind of like destined for like being some religious priest or some shit. And he's like, no, I'm gonna go into the Navy and do more fun things. His older brother sucked and was ruining their family, and he's like, I'm just gonna go to sea. And he's this young guy. He's really thoughtful. He's educated. Morality is like really on his mind, and he kept like extensive diaries. Definitely because of that. Like he was a very mindful guy. Wrote a lot. David Cheap, as a captain, you have to write a lot. And then the third big character, who's probably the antagonist. This is a tough one because this is where the book gets kind of like, not where it gets wonky, but where it eventually gets wonky, is David Cheap is maybe a protagonist, and this other guy named John Bulkley, I think, if I remember. John Bulkley is maybe the more antagonist of the two. Now, John Bulkley, he's been working on ships for a long time. He's a gunner, I think. He controls the cannons on the ship. He's the guy who's like, you set cannon to yard 5 angles up and fire. He's that guy, right? He's telling all the people on the gun deck, you do this, you do this, you do this. Team 1, blah, blah, blah. And he's really well experienced. He knows what he's doing, but he's not an officer in the way who can be promoted like David Cheap was. And it didn't seem like that was like his intention for a long time, but he's just super experienced. He knows the seas. He's been on there long enough, and he knows his job well. So they go down, they have some trouble, blah, blah, blah. The people on board are super stoked because they said, like, people weren't dumb. They knew that going around South America was super dangerous, right? So the British Admiralty is like, guys, whatever you can carry back, it's yours. You're going to where they make gold, literally, and take back as much as you carry. And so that's pretty fucking lit if you're a peasant or you were taken by a press gang, you're kidnapped, and they're like, you can actually have like more gold than a lot of noblemen can have gold. Than they do have. So people are getting pretty amped. They're like, let's go, boys. We're going to mess these Spaniards up. They won't know what hit them. We're going to go zip down, no problem. Get in there. Fuck them up. Do whatever we can. We won't liberate Peru, not the slaves that are there, or the natives that are being fucking decimated. They need to keep getting gold. We're just going to mess up the Spaniards. Anyway, they start, as they're going down, a really common problem at the time was you would just start, like, falling apart. Like your body, you would get sick, your teeth would fall out, your skin, you would age, and your skin is falling off your bones and shit like that. Really fucked up shit. Scurvy. Man, scurvy. It's so easy to get you. Just some vitamin C, man. That's all you need. Anyway, like, I think he says like something like half of them die or some shit. Like a lot of them die before they get to the hardest ocean on planet Earth. So they're going and they're fucked. And then they go in and they thought that they were going around the Cape, and I'm laughing. It's terrible. Like literally what these people went through was probably one of the greatest hells on earth you could possibly have. And it like just gets worse. Every day gets worse for these guys. At this point, a bunch of them are dying. They do not have the physical strength to work really effectively at all. And then they get there, they're told it's the best time to go around the Cape, and it's actually the literal worst time you could possibly try setting sail through these waters. And so they go through and get fucked up, and they get separated from their armada, and then their ship crashes into rocks, and that's the shipwreck. Long story short, so geographically, we're at near the southern end of Chile. Now, I don't know if you know a whole lot about Chile. A lot of mountains, a lot of rock, not really a whole lot of anything else, right? So they smash into a rock, they fall into the ocean, they find a bigger rock to get onto, they can see their ship stuck on the rocks. They look around them and there's just rocks. And they're like, okay, we have a problem here. Let's go back to the ship and take everything. Like every fucking board we can get, every barrel, every piece of rope, we're gonna need it. Yeah, not really like a Robinson Crusoe type situation. You're not on a tropical paradise. Like, again, barren, desolate, beaten by wind and waves, stormy as hell. And again, we're on the southern end of Chile. You know, when I think of South America, I think Brazil, I think Colombia, you know, we're talking rainforest. It's basically a whole big tropical island. Except what happens to North America and Europe, where the further north you go, the colder and shittier it gets. Same thing happens the further south you go. So, like, this place snows. Like, we're really close to the South Pole at this point. So they go through literal hell, and you know, you don't have to be a college graduate to see that that's gonna cause some interpersonal issues, right? You're gonna be a little off, right? You're not gonna be super kind to one another. So there is like chaos pretty quickly with a bunch of people beaten down by scurvy. David Cheap, he tries to roll command, and he justifies his command, thinking that we still have an objective of messing with the Spanish. We're shipwrecked, yes, but there is a possibility that we can make a ship or a raft and still keep going north to finish what we started. And so that's his justification for securing power. And that doesn't really fly with a lot of the guys. Go to John Bulkley. He's a really practical man. He sees the world from his vantage point. He has power, but he's not like from a position of power. You know what I mean? He's living in a hierarchical world. He is a peasant in the eyes of the nobility. You know, you can have John Bulkley, who has merit and experience and is tested, but he will never command a ship compared to like a kid who was just born in it, right? The era of nepotism. So he sees this world like this. He says, actually, David Cheap, you don't really have legitimacy here because the ship is gone, basically. We do not need to carry out our objective. What we need to do is survive. And so that's what the faction becomes. You have the Cheap group, which actually sustains a good number of people for a while. This sense of cultural honor and hierarchy is so embedded that, from at least from my perspective, it seems really irrational to be literally on a place with no resources in the most hostile environment you could possibly be in and still think that you can pose a threat to the strongest military or strongest navy rather on planet Earth. Like, that's insane. You don't have a duty to do that anymore. You're better off going back home, rearming, trying another strategy. So that I agree with John Bulkley, right? The problem is as the power dynamics of the group grow, uh, there was a faction that as the crash took place, they took advantage of the chaos, and these were people who took all the barrels of rum. They were driven by hedonism. They were like, again, a result of the press gangs. These are people who don't want to be here, probably criminals, probably mentally ill, um, are probably really bitter that they had to uproot their lives, probably completely against their will, to go and starve and experience disease and almost drown, and then be put in a place where you can't eat a good meal, right? So they live on one side of the island, and then John Bulkley and David Cheap, they're kind of having a power struggle with like the civilized side of it. Eventually, they actually encounter some indigenous people there who are, contrary to belief at the time, that area is often written about by sailors at a later time as being inhabited by cannibals. And I guess there's not actually a lot of evidence of that. That book I talked about, Sailing Alone Around the World by Joshua Slocum, he asserts that they were cannibals when he went through this area, which is my favorite part of the book. But David Grann makes a point of saying there's actually no evidence of that. And based on the accounts of David Cheap, John Byron, and John Bulkley, they actually come and be quite helpful, right? They give them some shelter, they give them some food, and they actually they're like a water-based people, so they island hop, and they have these canoes and they have like these dogs and stuff. They actually get some pictures in there. These indigenous people, I can't remember the name. They like cook on their boats. Their family unit resides on these boats. They're so waterborne, kind of like how people talk about Mongolians and horses. Like kids can ride a horse. It's the same thing with the boats, kind of thing. Anyway, they're super cool, and they're like, we can't, like, there's like 10 of us and like 40 or no, there's like 100 of them. There's like 100 of you, like, we can't really sustain you, but like we'll check in on you from time to time. And they give John Byron one of their dogs, and this sucks. This is like sad, spoiler alert. The other castaways, they kill and eat this dog that John Byron loved. Quite heartbreaking. Anyway, that was kind of like a little bit of hope before they're kind of left to their own devices and people eventually turn. There's power struggles with several people involved. It eventually leads to David Cheap shooting and killing someone who was challenging his authority, which was the thing to break the camp. That was because, if you believe that you are coming from a place of the British sensibility, like the empire is important, you can understand why killing this mutineer is important to maintain order. But if you believe that preserving life is more important, that was a huge violation of that whole essence. So John Bulkley, he basically is able to take advantage of that. And I think there were some of the boats that the indigenous people left, and then a bunch of so a lot of these boats had different kinds, like the ship, big ship, had a bunch of other little ships on it for various tasks, for ferrying, delivering messages, or for like emergencies. John Bulkley takes all of them. He's like, fuck you guys. We are leaving. We are going back around into the Atlantic. We're going to go through that horrible nonsense, and you can't stop us. We are taking this from you. And David Cheap, he draws a line in the sand. He's like, no, we need those ships to go mess with the Spanish in Peru. So, full mutiny. From David Cheap's point of view, these people are not only killing them because they're taking all the ships, they are going against the orders that they had. They're going against the essence of the British Empire. And again, these guys, their perspective, for me, a little more sympathetic. They're just trying to survive. And they make a calculation. Best way to go is this way. And David Cheap, he was set. No, we got to go north. We're not going to go back around through it. We're going to go north and complete our plans. So at that point, they actually have been living on the island for years. So a year of barely eating, like nothing to hunt, nothing to fish, like very tiny amounts. Like they had just fucking crackers and seaweed, right? That's all they had for a year. And again, scurvy, they're still like that didn't go away. That's still going on. Their bodies are falling apart as this is going on. And yeah, the power struggle ensues, and yeah, John Bulkley effectively takes most of the survivors. I think it's like 70 people in these boats, packs them through, and goes back the other way. And so we'll go focus on the story from John Bulkley's point of view. As they're going, they lose a lot of people to scurvy. They lose a lot of people to storms. They try and make land at places, and shit happens. They have to leave people behind. It gets pretty dark. A lot of people turn against John Bulkley, but he maintains power. He eventually hops up the Americas and gets across to Britain. Can't remember the exact details, but like literally out of the 70 of them that left, I think like 5 made it, okay, of that group, of John Bulkley's group. So it was horrible and harrowing. And obviously this is a crazy story for the news at the time. And they publish John Bulkley's memoirs. He kept a diary as well. He was not stupid. He was a smart, fairly relatively educated man, and he kind of saw himself as captain and was keeping records as if a captain throughout this whole experience. So they become a bit of celebrities. They obviously tell the story that makes them look good. And time goes on. Time goes on. 5 years of time actually goes on. And won't you know it? Wouldn't you believe it? Captain David Cheap, he shows up back in Britain. And he hears about John Bulkley and the 4 other fucking survivors and their heroic journey back to Britain. And he's like, that's not what happened. These fuckers fucked me. And so what happened with them is it took them 5 years to get back. So they actually did fashion a boat. I think they ran into the indigenous peoples again. They do try and take the Spanish. I think there's David Cheap, John Byron, and like one other. There's like actually 3 of them. And they try and fuck the Spanish. They get caught immediately, and then they're thrown in prison for years. That was their story. But eventually the war resolves, and the Spanish let them go, and they send them home. And then it creates this big media disaster. You have John Bulkley's story, which has ingratiated itself into the public eye. This was a big story. Big. Like, this is Casey Anthony big, okay? What was her name? Nancy Grace. If she was like a reporter in the 1700s, every day she's writing about this. Big deal. But then the captain, who is actually a captain, completely contradicts the story. So what happened is like a brave retreat of British soldiers comes out as vile, disgraceful mutiny. And it gets ugly really quick. They start slandering each other in the papers, and this is huge intrigue. And there's a little old innocent bystander in all this. The British Navy, they're like, oh my God, we can't be dealing with this right now. Like, we are trying to project power globally, and we're now having an issue of like how our Navy runs, like the biggest disaster and like the worst hell our sailors could go through happened, and now there's war between the 2 factions. So they actually have a tribunal, I think, a naval tribunal, have a bunch of the top admiralty guys. They get the big guns for this. They are like, we are not leaving this up for public discourse. They hear David Cheap, they hear John Bulkley, they hear John Byron, they hear the other survivors' tales, and they're like, we absolve everyone. Everyone was fine. No one's being charged with murder, David. No one's being charged with mutiny, John. You're all free to go, is what happened. The Admiralty is like that. So no one will talk about this anymore. They're like, we need to shut this fucking story up. And that's how it goes. No one was punished. That's the story. That's the end of the book. Now, there's a lot more action and intrigue. It's actually a little bit of a lackluster ending when you think about it. And when you're reading it, you're like, that's not very satisfying. But a lot in the book is really satisfying. There's lots of cool, like, little subplots. You know, I think David Grann knew that the book had that kind of ending, and he actually kind of talks about one of the surviving ships of the Armada, like the original admiral of the Armada. He survives. They're like capital ship. I don't know what they call it. They survive, and they decide to go back, and they fuck up. They get in this awesome fight with a big Spanish ship. Like he goes into this super cool duel of Navy ships. They're like going, I don't know. You just have to read. Like that part is so cool, and they put it like right at the end, so you get that dose of action. It's not really relevant. It's like just kind of related to like the survivors of the wager enough for it to kind of make sense. But it's a good dose of action at the end, and the conflict is really good throughout. And he does a super good job of like directly quoting the diaries of like these three major players, so you can get like a specific understanding of their frame of mind. And he fills in the gaps with everything else. Like he obviously Bulkley says this, Cheap says that, Byron says this. It's all on the same day. You know, this must have been what happened, or this is probably like what happened. And yeah, just the whole book was just so gripping. He writes like a reporter historian, so he gives you facts about the thing from like a modern perspective, but it doesn't really take you out of like the heads of the people. Like you're thinking about these guys actually trying to survive and actually trying to navigate their conflict with one another, but you're getting lots of good information that helps build the context. So this book really could. Meticulous research. I guess David Grann's really known for this. He just goes to town on researching shit. He actually went to this island where the wager shipwrecked, and actually, you know, you gotta love a book with pictures, and he puts a couple sections with pictures, and I think in the last section, he has photographs of his time visiting there. I don't know. I'm not gonna find it. But he actually went there and took photos of like what appeared to be some wood wreckage of the wager like 300 years later, like 400 years later. Like it's super cool. So that's that about the narrative. It's weaving reality with presumption. So it's you're getting these accounts, and David Cheap, he's writing his diary as if he's the captain. And these books are relevant, and they're kept, right, from the Navy's point of view. These are important documents. So he's writing this knowing that it's going to be looked at, even if he dies on the ship. But he's still, like, if he's ever found, that is his log, that is his record. He's going to make himself look good. He's going to make himself look like he's maintaining power like a good captain would. And John Bulkley, he maybe has his bias, like where he gets more extreme in his views. Now he has an opportunity to challenge the traditional hierarchy, right? David Cheap, he's a newbie. He really doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he's got experience. He's not no one, right? And I think even in the beginning, John Bulkley's like, this guy's really good. This guy's a good captain to have for a guy that's replacing the captain that was originally. David Cheap's not bad. So he had a good view on him in the beginning. It was just kind of like, why are we maintaining this? We are fucked. Like, we're sick. We're dying. We're starving. Like, we don't have a ship anymore. Like, why are we going to attack the Spanish? Again, I really relate to that. But he does get, like, quite underhanded and moves the whole thing. He doesn't... I don't know if that's true, actually. Like, he gave David Cheap a lot of opportunity to consider his actions and stuff going forward. Okay, so I mentioned weaving reality with presumption. That's going to get to like maybe like the more critical side that I had for this book. So like I said, a lot of facts, very riveting, cool battle scene at the end. The book is good, and I thought I was going to walk away and just, you know, maybe read it again 20 years from now and enjoy the hell out of it. But then I started thinking about it, like, and it took me a while to put into words, but it started getting like kind of into philosophy territory. Of like, the public in Britain knew the truth when John Bulkley arrived. They heard his account. These survivors crash landed on this godforsaken rock. They use their British aptitude to wrangle their boats, go through the most hostile enemy territory waters, the Spanish, the Portuguese. We're going to go through the cannibals. We're going to go up, maybe around Africa. It's an adventure story. British people, British boys, our kids gathered by the press gangs. They made it back. God bless Britain. That was the truth. And then the captain, who has way more legitimacy in a hierarchical setting, completely defies that. Truth is no more. This is actually a really good opportunity to question hierarchy, right? Why? Who's to say that this captain can tell the truth? We know. We've had 5 years to marinate on this, buddy. We had 5 years to marinate. We know John Bulkley's a hero, and all the 70 people who died and weren't able to make it back. They were heroes. They were our boys. God damn it. We need to make Britain great again. Okay, we are boys. We need freedom. We need to get government out of our navy. So that's a little hint where I'm going to go with this. So this gets into a few things. Constructivism. That's an agenda setting to pace the truth. You construct reality. Reality, its history is written by the winners, right? Actually, not a lot of relevance, but it's what made Game of Thrones good, where it really demonstrated, the Golden Prince, what's his fucking Prince Handsome, Prince Charming, Prince Charming was Jaime Lannister, right? Brutal, conniving, cruel, very selfish. He's the glittering golden lion knight, right? That's the Prince Charming in the tales. That's constructivism, man. And then using media as a tool. David Cheap, he got back, and his reputation was literally on the line. He needed to fight back, and he needed to say that John Bulkley was bad. He was using the media to protect himself, because if he convinced the Admiralty that he was not making wise decisions, that he actually didn't have grounds to be a captain while they were shipwrecked, that's putting a lot of problems. The guy he killed, that's murder if that's the case. If that's the way people see things, he has a big problem. So he's using media as a tool. Another note I have is epistemic injustice. So that's about your social standing, where your validity, your legitimacy is dictated how you're born, right? John Bulkley, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about John Bulkley, but from my point of view, John Bulkley probably had more of a point than David Cheap while they were shipwrecked. But the fact that David Cheap comes from that side of the things brings a huge blow to Bulkley's legitimacy, right? This is huge. And then the next major area that this book really hits on is history's liquid, right? We know history is true until we find out otherwise. So again, going to that point, the British people are like, damn, this shit really happened. Make Britain great again, yada yada. Wait a second. That's not true. What in the Sam heck is going on here? History changes. Things change. Humans are born from God. Actually, Darwin, fuck off. We're from monkeys, baby. Your history's fucked. 6,000 years. Suck my dick. Suck my dick. I'm pretending to be Darwin. So those are big things. And you think about it. It's kind of like a war of words, right? A war of words. Truth is what truth is. If you acknowledge something to be true, then it is true, right? You acknowledge something to be false, then it is false, right? If you don't acknowledge that it's true, then it's false. You don't acknowledge that it's false, it's true. This is a problem that we're having in our social media landscape. It kind of hit me like a train of bricks. that David Grann, he was writing about the hyper-polarized political landscape. I think in particular the United States, but we've been seeing for like the last decade around the Western world this rise of conservatism versus this a fracture of the polarizing left. There is a clash. You know, you figure, I won't beat around the bush. Donald Trump, he just says, not true. That's not true. That's not true. I never did nothing with nobody. That didn't happen. And then everyone's like, but it says, like, it literally is documented that you did. And he's like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. That's how people are persuaded these days. You can have someone who agrees with you, or you agree with, rather, and they're just like, that's not true. It never happened. I never did nothing on Epstein's Island. And then his supporters are like, yeah, seems good to me. Didn't happen. Checks out. Checks out. And conversely, like the other way around, like, no, like, you know, you look at the pro-communist people, and, you know, communism never failed. It didn't have an opportunity to be real communism. And okay, we'll ignore the evidence. You are just saying it. Now we can proceed that it's not real. We are in this plastic reality. We've always have been, but maybe it's worse now. And maybe that's what David Grann's trying to, like, two perspectives can tell the same thing. And this, in fact, he gives three perspectives. John Byron, he gives a very measured response. He's very respectful. He really sees John Bulkley's side of things, but he stands with David Cheap. He's with this aristocracy. You have three perspectives, and depending on the side, it changes everything. If you deny evidence that this side has, then this side is very legitimate. But if you deny the evidence that this side has had, this is really legitimate. The world is a fuckaroo. Like, you can't really go much further than that. So, yeah, this is a historical book. It's telling a history. It's telling a history that is documented, that, you know, to the best of our ability, what researchers would use to say what happened when we landed in Africa, and slaves were picked up. You know, the captains kept logs. This proves the captain logs are not reasonable. It's not reasonable to hold that. So history's only true for what we know. But what we know can be filtered and controlled, and it's filtered and controlled by people writing it and engaging it, who have biases and have motives to have it framed that way. They're making a point, even if they're not realizing it. So we're going to, like, the furthest extreme. Colonial slave traders arrive in Africa, an abhorrent crime, a terrible stain on human history. You know, the argument that, like, slavery goes to every culture, but nothing was as dreadful and cruel and just insane as the African slave trade across the Atlantic. Most slave systems had a way out, or that there was some semblance of respect, or there was just something else. It wasn't inherent. You weren't inherently a slave. This was the first time ever. This is horrible. This is dark. You're kidnapping people. And at first, like, if you really get into the history of slavery, like, they had, when they were taken over to, like, the sugar plantations or whatever in South America, like, a slave lived for 30 days. They worked them till death. It was cheaper to work a slave till death than to keep them alive. Like, at that time, it was horrible. So you're a slave trader landing there. You are an employee, or you are a ranked official in a system. You want promotion, or at least you don't want retribution from your higher ups. You are going to do your job well. You're going to do your job as respectfully as possible, and you're going to write that, and you have a motive for using the sequence of words to get an outcome. And then flash forward hundreds of years, we look at that and go, oh, that was a pretty nice dude catching all those slaves. That was a pretty nice guy, you know. That's probably not what happened. We can honestly look at those records, and then this book's a great example of this, is everything suspect. And we should treat everything as suspect. If it's written by a human, and I mean, we can go take this the further degree. Like, does AI have a motive? Like, when we start making things that can write for itself, are they going to have this same kind of sense of bias and objective setting when they're writing? Anyway, not like super relevant, but like to use it as categorical evidence of truth is not reasonable. And this book makes a really good point. Like it just kind of clicked in my head, and I just this is about everything. This is about everything in the past. This is about how we treat history. This is how people talk now, and this is how we're going to work in the future. This is what humans do. And this, I mean, I'm not here to solve problems, but I think humans are quite often driven. Like one of our strongest evolutionary tools is our social need and our role in a social group rather. And I think the tool that modifies our behavior is our desire to be in the group, because if you're in the group, you're getting a share of the food, and the deeper you are in the group, the more secure your spot is. You don't have to risk like the idea of faux pas is so important, because if you're ostracized, you're out. Okay, back when we're running around fields and forests, like, you're not in the group, you offend someone, you kill someone, you hurt someone, and the group decides you are not worth keeping around, you are on your own, and that means you're probably gonna die. So it's a survival trait. Kind of on a side point about this, I think the concept of celebrity and celebrity worship is related to that. Like, where we all wish that we were rock stars, Nickelback. We all wish we were actors. Everyone who goes to drama school is like, I'm going to be the next Brad Pitt. I'm going to be, if I have a band, I'm going to be the next Coldplay. I'm going to, and everyone has like this delusion, but it's like a desperate hope. It's like wanting to win the lottery. And it's because if you're a celebrity, you're in. You are the most in that you could possibly be. Anyway, another point. That same mechanism in our brain is why I think people write and frame things the way they do. John Bulkley, he's trying to preserve himself, right? He's trying to justify himself because he knows what he's doing when he's on the island. That's mutiny, right? It seems rational from our point of view, trying to survive, but this captain, or I guess David Cheap, he's asserting himself as captain and as the authority. We as John Bulkley and the survivors, we have respected that hierarchy until now. If we defy, that means we are rejecting his captaincy. We have to have a clear rationale for why that is. So they use murder. We use, they like John Bulkley describes him as sickly and maybe going crazy. Like, he's not a valid source of authority. And he has reason to write that. It's not just like that's his experience. Well, it shapes his experience, but he has to write it that way. Otherwise, David Cheap is right? Like it has. That is like the necessary component for the outcome of ascension. Like he knows he has to prove himself. If he wants to get back to Britain, he needs to prove himself. How does he do that? With his accounts. And he tries to make it as measured as possible, as reasonable as possible, because it's going to be under more scrutiny, because he's not like a nobleman, right? And he does that successfully. The only problem is when the essence of that hierarchy, the aristocracy, comes back as David Cheap, does that put everything into question. John Bulkley was at a disadvantage. He had, again, lots of good points. David Cheap probably had the worst plan of them all. We can say if we're looking at percentage-wise, John Bulkley's plan to survival had a huge death rate, whereas David Cheap's plan kind of inadvertently led to like a higher survival rate. But I actually just thought of that. That's a way you could evaluate those two positions. where there's maybe a more conservative route. Captain David Cheap, very interesting. John Bulkley, very interesting. Good characters. John Byron was a nice reprieve. He gives like a nice measured look at the both of them and gives a good moral perspective, because both perspectives can be seen as pretty, not bloodthirsty, but pretty callous, right? And John Byron has that humanity to him, so he's probably the best character. David Cheap, his ascension to be captain, kind of in the first third of the book, is really interesting. And John Bulkley, seeing how he writes and how he frames things, you kind of see the desperation in it, and he's right. Like, he doesn't know he's going to survive. He doesn't know David Cheap's going to survive. He just knows that if he does, he has to, like, prove that he's morally correct and that what he is doing is not, like, a horrible crime, which mutiny is at the time. Still is, but Byron was the best. Poor doggo. That was a comment I had. The main mutineer, blah, 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 I said that he's a douchebag. By the end, he gets more of a douchebag. I kind of don't like him as much. Press gangs, I said at the beginning, what the fuck? How was that tolerated at all? That's an insane way to organize society. To just, like, it's time for war. The war is over fucking nonsense. Let's get the press gangs and load up those ships, baby. Like, that, I cannot imagine experiencing that. Just having your whole life uprooted. That's so brutal and so awful. I had no idea. Like, every part of naval life seems fucking awful. Like I said, I like nautical stories. I'm quite landlocked. I'm not really a seafarer. So it's really the imaginary side of it. I know the ocean's scary. I've been to the ocean. Okay? I'm not a total landlubber. The ocean's a terrifying place. It's a very powerful thing. It's hard to navigate. But in my head, I thought, like, we, as in humans, had made it reasonable to some extent. Fuck no. Fuck no. When the British are doing their shit, it sucked. It's awful. They didn't plan. It was a disaster at every fucking turn. I am so glad I didn't experience that. And honestly, the people who did endure that and then would choose to go back and make this a career for themselves, holy shit. These are impressive people. And say what you will about the colonial powers and their impact around the world. You know, there's a lot of horrible things to say. They did really unite the world in a way that definitely never has happened. We are in this era because of that control that was projected through the seas. And so these people who have this mind for the ocean, I honestly can't relate. Like, that, it was so dangerous. It was so stricken by, because it wasn't just scurvy. Like, these fucking dumbasses are going to sea. I mean, they obviously didn't know, but I'm just, from my perspective, like, grab a fucking lime, right? Take a lime with you. They last a long time, guys. Take a lime with you. Which they eventually did. That's why the British were called limeys. History fact. Like, you go to the fucking Congo, malaria. Fucking go over there, typhus. You go over to the Middle East, Black Plague. Like, it's like every time you go somewhere, it's like you could get fucked by the craziest disease imaginable. You could be fucked by the most venomous animals that you couldn't even comprehend, or you could be fucked by, like, the most insane out there culture you can't dream of, right? Like, these guys would go out, they projected power and they were cruel about it, but fuck, you had to have nuts to do that shit. Like, to go out and do that, be like, 3 years of my life seeing everyone I know die. Pretty fun. My wife's annoying. I am going to go back to sea and have gay sex with my buds. Sailor's life for me, right, guys? Last few comments, we're getting to the end of this. So they had one black character in the story. They had a character who actually, David Grann kind of teed up to be a really interesting character, and I would say this is the weakest part of the book. So this is a black character. He's a freed slave, and he's working on this ship. And that's interesting. But he obviously, and David Grann makes a point, he was a former slave. He doesn't know how to write. He's not really involved in the culture or anything. He just kind of does the work that he wants to do. I was hoping to get more perspective on that. I was like the Cheap, Bulkley, and Byron didn't really write about him a whole lot. They had some like decent respect for him, but you know there was obviously that racist tone where whatever he had to contribute in their day to day lives wasn't worth putting in the book. And I'm like making that suggestion. Maybe the black character really had bad ideas or something like that. But maybe he had some good ideas, and because they were racist, they didn't really include it. I actually, you know, and this goes to show how much like research Grann actually puts in to his works. Is that I wish that he made more of an imaginary involvement of this character. He gives him a super sad ending, which is true. This is like of the few times anyone acknowledges him in their diaries. Like so he goes with Bulkley up South America. So once they get past the Cape and they're going back north up the Atlantic, they stop, and they're caught by like I can't remember if it was the Spanish or Portuguese colonizers, and they're like, "Hey, a black guy, another slave," and they get him. This guy survived hell on earth. He was a slave. Two hells on earth. He was a slave. Got freed. Joined the Navy. Goes through the worst shipwreck possible. Escapes. Slave again. Fuck. And again, to the most brutal slave driver. Like, just, fuck, that's awful. I mean, good on David Grann for making a point of mentioning, like, just, God, these guys did not get breaks at all. But on the other hand, I think that would have been a cool opportunity for character growth, and that's where I would maybe, if I were writing it, I would want maybe more fake imaginary stuff about his involvement. I think I would make the story a little more interesting. Other than that, I don't know what else could have been added to make this book better. I was engaged right away. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. I know it's very popular. Many of you may have probably read it. If you haven't and you're into history or you're into like survival stories, that's what I would like categorize this as, like survival story or a history story, and like the lens view of society is just kind of like a byproduct of that. That's really the crux, the meat of these stories. If you like either of those, fucking read it. It's super good. You're gonna have a good time. Since reading it, I have been reading a lot. I've crushed another book this summer already. Well into another one. I am very, very happy with how I'm feeling about reading. And you know what? This book really had me going. So, again, big props to David Grann. This makes me want to check out his other stuff. I want to know what you guys, if you've read it, what you think. If you haven't, like, do you plan to? I hope this is convincing. So yeah, I guess now it's the meandering end of the video. This has been, I wrote a title for it. I don't know if I'm going to use it in the final edit, but The Gamble of Truth! Cards in My Favor! A review of the wager. That's what I thought the title should be of this. Let me know if you liked it. I got some really good feedback from the Death in Venice one. Again, I kind of set off on a quest to do modern books. But I'm kind of just going to do books. I'm going to do a hot take as a book reviewer. I'm just going to read books that interest me. If you have suggestions, let me know what you like. Yeah, that's going to be the end of this. I'm not going to do a skit. Bye!